confirm, Mr. Chairman, that the live stream has now been started.
Yeah. Before I formally start the meeting, I confirm this meeting is being held in accordance with the Licensing Act of 2003 and the Licensing Act Hearing Regulations of 2005, which allow councils to make their own arrangements for licensing subcommittees to hear their matters in connection with premises licence. I will begin by introducing the subcommittee members and officers who will be present throughout the meeting. I do apologise that we're running late. I'm the Chair, Councillor Paul Andrews. To me, my immediate left is Councillor Polly Andrews. To her left is Councillor John Hardwick. Legal advisor to the subcommittee to my right is Lorna Lucas. Clerk to the subcommittee is Sarah Bethry. Technical support is Alfie Rees-Glinos, and Democratic Services are Matt Evans, just observing today. Other attendees will be introduced at the relevant stages of the meeting. Please note the following points with regard to the conduct of this meeting. The Council is video and audio streaming this meeting live on the internet and making a recording. The recording forms part of the public record of the meeting and will be available on the Council's website. Please remember what you say and do in this meeting has a global reach, and your words and actions should be chosen carefully. Please ensure all mobile devices are switched to silent. If any remote attendee loses connection, the meeting will be paused to ascertain if the connection can be restored quickly. If it is not possible to recover the connection within a reasonable amount of time, the meeting will continue as long as a quorum of subcommittee members remains able to hear the proceedings and be heard. If you plan to leave before the end of the meeting, please can you indicate this in advance? Are there any questions about the procedures before we continue? Can't see any. All right. Thank you. I'll now proceed with the formal agenda of the meeting. Apologies for absence.
There are none, Chair.
Name substitutes?
Again, none.
Declarations of interest. Are there any Schedule 1, Schedule 2 or other interests to be declared for the items on the agenda today? No? Okay. Right. Application of occasional grant of a premises licence in respect of How the Light Gets In Festival 2023, Licensing Act 2003. Consider an application for the grant of this occasional premises licence in respect of How the Light Gets In 2023 under the Licensing Act of 2003. In attendance for this application, we have in the room, on behalf of the licensing authority, Emma Bell. I will go to each attendee to confirm. You are able to hear me, and I will confirm in response that I can hear you. Where practical, please have your video switched on that you can see by the members in attendance and the public watching. I think we go to Emma first, don't we? Yeah. So Emma, please present the report.
Thank you, Chair. So the recommendations for the subcommittee today is to determine the application with a view to promote the licensing objectives in the overall interest of the local community. They should give appropriate weight to steps that are appropriate to promote those licensing objectives, representations, including any supporting information presented by all parties, the guidance issued to local authorities under Section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003, and the Herefordshire Council Statement of Licensing Policy 2020 to 2025. And the reasons for these recommendations are ensure compliance with the Licensing Act 2003. There are a number of options open to the subcommittee today. One would be to grant the licence subject to conditions that are consistent with the operating schedule. Grant the licence subject to modified conditions to that of the operating schedule. Exclude from the scope of the licence any of the licensable activities to which the application relates. Refuse to specify a person in the licence as the premises supervisor, or to refuse the application. The application for the grant of occasional premise licence has received relevant representation and is therefore brought before the subcommittee today for determination. Herefordshire Council Statement of Licensing Policy 2020 to 25 states all representations must be relevant. For example, they must be about the likely effect of the grant of the application. This follows paragraph 8.57 in the Section 182 guidance, which uses the same wording. The details of the application are: the applicant is Amanda Houghton, who received the application on the 6th of March 2023 28-day consultation started on the 7th of March 23, and the consultation ended on the 3rd of April 23. The application Appendix 1 requests the following. On Friday 26th of May 23 to Monday the 29th of May 23, films, live music, recorded music, performance of dance and anything similar, all indoors. Friday from 1 p.m. until 1 a.m, Saturday and Sunday 9 a.m. until 1 a.m, and Monday 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. Late night refreshment, indoors and outdoors, Friday to Sunday 11 p.m. until 1 a.m. and sale and supply of alcohol for consumption on and off the premises, Friday 1 p.m. until 1:45 in the morning, Saturday and Sunday 11 a.m. until 1:45 in the morning, and Monday 11 a.m. until 4:45 in the afternoon. No representations have been received from the responsible authorities. 4 relevant representations have been received from members of the public in line with the licensing objective prevention of public nuisance that the licensing authority have accepted as being relevant, and that can be found at Appendix 2. A number of the relevant public representations highlighted concerns about the increased traffic, though these cannot be considered today in determining the application in accordance with the Licensing Act 2003. 7 letters of support were received from members of the public during the consultation period, mainly stating that they have not experienced any noise nuisance in the past, and that can be found at Appendix 3. Before submitting the application, the premise licence holder sent a letter to local residents outlining the details of the event, and the letter can be found at Appendix 4. A little bit of history regarding the festival. In 2018, the festival was run on temporary event notices. In 2019 and 2020, the festival was licensed under an occasional premise licence, although due to the COVID pandemic, the 2020 festival was cancelled. The application in 2019 received public representation and was therefore brought before the licensing subcommittee, where the decision was made to grant the licence subject to the inclusion of adequate conditions in relation to public nuisance and protection of children from harm. The application in 2020 received an objection from a responsible authority, but the hearing was cancelled due to the applicant agreeing the proposed conditions under the 4 licensing objectives, and then further cancelled due to the COVID pandemic. The application in 22 received 1 representation from West Mercia Police, and the conditions were agreed by the applicant. 5 relevant public representations were received in line with the licensing objective prevention of public nuisance. The subcommittee's decision was to grant the licence as applied for. Any decision may have an impact on the local community. There are environmental impacts and legal implications that are set out in this report, and also a quality duty. There are unlikely to be any financial implications for the council as a licensing authority at this time, and the report is in relation to a premise licence under the Licensing Act 2003, and as such there are minimal resource implications for the council. Schedule 5 of the Licensing Act 2003 gives a right of appeal to Magistrates' Court. This appeal must be made within 21 days beginning with the day on which the appellant was notified by the licensing authority of the decision appealed against. There is little risk associated with the decision at this time, as the legislation allows a right of appeal to the Magistrates' Court. All responsible authorities and members of the public living within Herefordshire have been consulted. Appendices 1 to 4 are found at the back of this report, and since the report has been published, a number of supplements have also been published that I've received from the applicant. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've just got to apologise because I did miss something on the order that we were meant to. So I'm just going to go back slightly before we ask any questions of Emma. I will go to each motor attendee to confirm that you'll be able to hear me. I do apologise for this. I'm confirming response that I can hear you. Where practical, please have your video switched on that you can be seen by members in attendance and the public watching. So the public representations, Jeffrey out?
Yes,
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Thank you. And I can hear you and see you. Dawn Farnworth?
Yes, I can hear you and see you.
Thank you very much. And I can hear and see you. Guy Perkins?
Yes, I can hear you and see you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Julia Whittle?
Yes, I can hear you and see you.
Thank you very much. The applicant's legal representation, Ewan McGregor?
Good morning.
Oh,
Sorry, I can see and hear you. You probably didn't hear me because I was on mute.
that's fine. I can hear and see you. Thank you. For the applicant, Hilary Lawson.
I can see and hear you.
Yeah. Jazz Bakar.
Yes, I can see and hear you.
And I can hear and see you. Mandy Horton.
Yes, I can hear and see you.
Calvin Hanks, Principal Consultant.
Yes, I can hear and see you.
And I can hear and see you both, Mandy and Calvin. Thank you. Obviously, we just heard from Emma Bowell. As we have several speakers and a number of issues to consider, I'll be permitting up to 15 minutes per speaker. I will exercise my discretion, but if I ask you to conclude your presentation, please do so promptly. We've already heard from Emma Bowell on behalf of the Licensing Authority. Any questions?
No,
Not currently, no.
not at the moment, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will now go to Jeffrey Out.
Yeah.
Please carry on in your own good time.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Although I have made a written personal representation in advance of this meeting, I know that I echo the feelings of at least 4 other households in Booker's Edge, one in Newport Street and one in Nanty Glasgow Lane. These households were unable to meet the deadlines to make their own representations at this meeting due to their workloads and the timing of the deadline dates so close to the Easter holiday period. I've already said in my representation for most of what I want you to take into account, but there are a few points which I would like to highlight so that you can take them into account when you make a decision. My key area of objection to the license being granted is public nuisance, particularly with regard to noise late at night and into the early hours of the morning. I live in Booker's Edge, which is a residential development of 25 houses off Newport Street, opposite the festival site. Most of the homes were constructed in 2019, been occupied only since late 2019 or 2020. So the residents would have missed the 2019 festival and only experienced the noise for the first time last year, because there were no festivals in 2020 or 21. These houses are around 60 metres from the festival entrance and only about 70 metres from the largest arena stage, which has a capacity for around 500 people and which hosts the largest of the music events. To illustrate my point, I'm just going to show you a plan which I included in my submission.
Yeah.
There we go. That's what I've got. And first, let me explain that this is Newport Street along here, and that these are the houses in the development of Booker's Edge. And this is the arena stage. You can see over here a scale for the plan that, if you can't see it, is 62.5 meters, the full length of that scale bar. So you can see around 70 meters is the distance between the arena stage and the housing, and about 60 meters from entrance to houses here. In addition to this, there's been a lot of recent cutting back of the undergrowth and the trees along this boundary of the site, which will lead to less attenuation of any sound from the site. I'm unclear as to why the organisers have chosen to locate this huge stage so close to the houses when it could easily have been up the other end of the site, somewhere over here. Last year, many neighbours, and I suffered major disturbance from loud music and crowd noise, preventing sleep until around 1 AM on at least 2 of the 3 nights of the festival. To be fair, there was a thunderstorm on the last night, which would have kept us awake anyway. The music was described to the licence hearing last year as mainly from the genre folk music. What we heard was definitely not folk. we had to put up with loud and repetitive booming bass beats reverberating around our houses until the wee small hours of the morning. This was very wearing. After 3 nights of this kind of thing, we were feeling exhausted from lack of sleep and could not function properly during the daytime. I'm sure that you good people on the licensing committee would not be on top form if you also experienced this. Looking at the noise limits for last year, they were supposed to be less than 60 dBA up to 11 PM and 45 dBA after 11 PM until 1 AM. The same limits are currently in this year's plan. The government guidance on noise levels at night is 34 dBA maximum, where the underlying noise level is 24 dBA or less, or 10 dBA above the underlying noise level, if that is more than 24 dBA. I note from the noise management plan that it's proposed to take background noise level readings between 12 midday and the event start on Friday, the 26th of May. Booker's Edge is normally a very quiet place, and I would question why the background levels are being taken in the middle of a very busy day, likely to have increased traffic due to this festival, and also the main Hay Literary Festival. Surely the background levels should be taken a few weeks before the festival, both during the day and in the quiet of the night after 11 PM, to be representative of the area. In response to some of the points made in document MH5, which was a response to representations, particularly points 8 and 9 and the agenda supplement information from the applicant. On point 8, it is true that the houses in Booker's Edge were built after the first festival on the current site, but the noise nuisance rules apply equally to new and old houses. On point 9, I did speak to Mr. Hanks, who was measuring sound level at the end of Booker's Edge on Thursday, the 2nd of June last year, at about 11:10 PM. He told me he had measured 59 dBA and was allowed to go to 60 dBA. Maybe I misunderstood something, but I would have expected the readings to be below the level of 45 dBA shown in the noise management plan, as this was after 11 PM. One further point on the Appendix 3 letters of support. To be heard at this meeting, we've had to complete representation forms and give name and address details. Most of these letters of support are just emails. How can the council verify the name and address details if they are not on the correct form? Hopefully, after all of this, you will understand some of our concerns over the noise nuisance from the festival. We're appealing to you to amend the license conditions for an 11 PM finish each night of the festival to enable residents to get a reasonable night's sleep in their own homes. Even a reduction of licensing hours to finish at midnight would help. 1 AM for 3 nights in a row is unreasonable, in our opinion. Thank you for your time, and I will finish at that.
Right, thank you, Mr. Elt. I've got one question to ask you. When you heard the noises and you had the complaints, did you complain to Herefordshire Council? Did you log it with Environmental Health?
Yes, I did.
Right, how many times did you do that, please, Mr. Elt? Was it just once, twice, 3 times?
It was once. I couldn't actually get through on the number.
Right.
It was a bank holiday and there was nobody answering the phone. So it was reported later.
How much later? Was it the next day or was it?
I certainly tried the next day and didn't get any response.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Eld. Any questions from members?
No.
No?
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you complain to the noise management at the site at the time?
Couldn't actually get through on the night, but the next morning I did phone Mrs. Howden.
Okay,
Thank you.
right. Okay, now I go on to Dawn Farnworth. Like to speak? You're in a good time.
Hi. Thank you for this opportunity to speak and voice my concerns over how the light gets in 23. I would like to start with a little background information and my experience in dealing with the festival over the years. I live and operate a viable tourism accommodation business opposite the festival site.
Sorry.
We have 5 full-time and 2 part-time members of staff year-round. Last year, as a direct result of noise, I suffered a financial loss of £3,510, both in refunds given to guests who returned home and giving free stays later in the year. Prior to How the Light Gets In 22, I spoke to Mandy Horton about the event and she assured me there would be no impact on my business. She did offer to take up my accommodation, but by that stage we were already full. I advised my guests of the festival and likely noise impact, giving them full details of the event. Some guests would go into the festival and they later told me the noise on site was a lot less than with us. I complained every day during the event to Mandy Horton, Herefordshire and Powys Environmental Health and the police. I made official complaints after the event and gave evidence to Jacqueline O'Mahony, How the Light Gets In, Herefordshire and Powys Environmental Health and SAG representatives. I asked How the Light Gets In to meet me halfway on my losses, £1,770, but to no avail. That was last year. And so moving forward to this year, I ask that I can please be taken into consideration. I have taken the decision to close for the festival because I simply cannot operate, suffering a financial loss of £5,310 in booking fees alone. How the Light Gets In have offered to take up my site for the festival at a reduced rate for a block booking, but this I cannot do for the following reason. On the last night of How the Light Gets In 22, some of the staff decided to have a party on my riverbank, directly opposite the festival site, where they destroyed habitat piles and caused damage to trees in order to build a large bonfire. We had to evict them after they caused distress to my one remaining family on site. I informed Mandy Horton on the following morning. Firstly, there was denial until I gave her some names, and she confirmed that they were indeed staff. If this happens again this year, I will be calling the police. I will not let my accommodation to a business that shows little regard for other people's property and livelihood. Moving on to the current licence application and subsequent additional information, a very thorough and impressive document. It's all well and good to have great intentions, but putting them into practice is a different matter, as we have seen from last year's festival. I would like to ask that it closes at 11 p.m. The application states that the primary output is talks and debates, which cease at 7 p.m. This would still allow 4 hours for music and cabaret across 4 venues. They argue that this would require a consideration as to the viability, but according to submitted information, at no point has the festival been profitable, even though it's been running since 2009. Surely then it's not viable at present and hasn't been throughout its existence. So dropping the 17 acts after 11 p.m. from the 250 events publicised would not make that much difference to the viability. The application also states pulling forward the closing time would mean a substantial reduction in revenue. Does that then mean it's not predominantly talks and debates, but a music festival? Since 2019, the last festival, the area has changed dramatically with a new housing estate now established, as well as myself. So bringing the closing time forward to 11 p.m. would mean much less disturbance to nearby residents and the possibility of me being able to open my business, thus not infringing my human rights. Point 55A of the additional information states that the site is not immediately adjacent to residential dwellings, but I would argue that my tree houses are residential, albeit tourism accommodation, and therefore deserve consideration as we are approximately 60 metres away directly across the river. Point 55 touched on wildlife. I appreciate the ecological impacts are not an issue for the licensing application, but I wish to bring it to your attention that the site is on an area of SSSI and SAC and a documented site for the hibernation and transition of the lesser horseshoe bat. In our woodland, 60 metres across the river, we also have a further 4 species of bats, And there are EPS, namely swans, otters, water vole, hazel dormice, which is why the lighting is a problem. And I wasn't complaining about the laser lights. I was more concerned with the fluorescent and stadium-style floodlighting. Would it be an idea to have an environmental impact assessment, or at least an officer? As I previously stated, there was a wildlife crime committed and reported last year's festival, namely the swan abandons its nest. I fully understand the need for lighting, but it has to be done in an environmentally sensitive way for this site. As regards fireworks, etc., will the public be getting any evidence, any advance notice of this, or is it just the licensing committee 14 days prior to the event? Point 55F was in connection with the silent disco. I purely meant the Riverside disco tent, as I believe it was the bass sound in the majority of the sets that was causing the crockery and glassware to fall off the shelves. I just thought it would be an idea to try and lessen the impact of the mishmash of noise. Moving on to the noise management plan, that also looks like a very comprehensive document, and it is in draft form and it states that it can be amended. Can I please request a noise monitoring station at my site, being the closest neighbour? I appreciate I'm in Powys, but there is one at Boatside Farm, also in Powys, and 2 fields away. I've asked Mandy Horton, and she told me to ask Herefordshire Environmental Health. So I asked Jacqueline O'Mahony, who told me to speak to Stuart Eckley, which I have. But I would like the findings to be submitted and accepted by everybody after the event, so I thought I would ask you as well. Mr. Calvin Hanks was the only person to visit my site last year, despite numerous complaints. He came out at the request of Mandy Horton several times each night and got the volume turned down every visit, only for it to be turned up again shortly afterwards. What measurements are in place for this not to happen again this year, as presumably the same instructions were given but not adhered to? The noise management plan only seems to show 6 acts after 11 p.m. with nothing booked after 11:30 and no mention of the DJ sets, if I read it correctly. This would be nothing to cancel or rearrange if we could bring the closing time forward to 11 p.m. Government guidelines state 34 dBA after 11 p.m, so the noise management plan already contravenes current guidelines. It also states the background noise tests will take place between midday and the event commencement. I would argue that this is not representative of noise levels outside of festival times, and could they not be carried out a couple of weeks beforehand during the day and at say 7 p.m, 11 p.m, and 1 a.m. to get more accurate readings? Keyser Parish Council said they supported the application in principle as long as there was a thorough and convincing NMP in place, and this I believe there is, but how with all the best will in the world will it be put into practice? I haven't met one person who wants to stop the festival. It's a very good thing and it brings people into the area. I only want some consideration and for how the light gets in to adhere to the conditions set and statements made. If closing time was 11 p.m, this job would be made considerably easier. And if they were as serious as they claim to be about working with the community over issues raised, wouldn't a public meeting have been a very good idea? Thank you, and that's what I've got to say.
Thank you, Mrs. Farnworth. I now go to Guy Perkins.
Same thing.
I would like to say right away that I have no objection to a philosophy festival. What I do object to is a late night music festival less than 100 yards from my house, operating in disguise as a philosophy festival. What we actually have is a hybrid event. Yes, the ideas and philosophy events are admirable and to be applauded. But to quote from their own website, How the Light Gets In has a, quote, music lineup that would shame the average summer festival. Why does a philosophy festival need hours and hours of very loud music? Why does it need hours and hours of drinking to 1 a.m. in a quiet residential environment? Last year, every night of the festival, my wife and I lost sleep, a lot of sleep. If you are kept awake by thumping music until 1 a.m, you don't just drop off to sleep 5 minutes later. You are stressed. You have been up phoning the various numbers provided. You have been out on the street talking to the sound monitoring engineer. You get the sound lowered for a bit, although it still intrudes into your bedroom, and then shortly after it gets louder again. It is extremely upsetting. The organisers say that the sound limits will be up to 60 decibels until 11 p.m. and then until the end of the proceedings, late in the morning or early in the morning, 45 decibels will be the limit. Last year, this level of sound was very intrusive. The World Health Organization recommends a maximum daytime sound level of under 50 decibels due to prevent, quote, moderate annoyance. They recommend a guideline level of 30 decibels for undisturbed sleep. What chance have we got for undisturbed sleep if this event goes ahead as planned? The festival places great emphasis on how much money it brings into the local community. I don't doubt that the festival contributes to the local economy for a few days. But my wife and I run a shop in the middle of Hay, which operates all the year round. In our very small way, we contribute to the economy of the town throughout the year without disturbing anybody. Like the Hay Literary Festival, and like 99% of all other businesses in Hay, we respect our neighbours. We will be working flat out in our shop each and every day during Hay Festival and during How the Light Gets In. We would normally be asleep by 10:30 p.m. We won't be asleep until about 2 a.m. if this licence is granted, and I think we and all residents should be allowed to live and work in peace. How the Light Gets In claims they run every year at a loss. At the same time, they claim that the late night loud music and drinking is essential to maintain the ticket price. Like most of their claims, there is no verifiable evidence presented. I find it strange that the event keeps going if it genuinely runs at a loss. Whatever the case, Hay Literary Festival has demonstrated over many years how it is possible to run a very successful festival which closes at 11 p.m. And they close at 11 p.m. to minimize disturbance to the town and its residents. They respect the town and its residents. How the Light Gets In has presented a massive 162-page supplement to support their application. It looks impressive, but it is full of unsupported claims. One example can be found at the bottom of page 11. I quote, "If we were to close at the same time as Hay Literary Festival, this would potentially create a much greater problem for Hay in terms of antisocial behaviour, as there will be more people exiting both festivals at the same time. The two festivals are at opposite ends of the town, literally a mile apart. Are they suggesting that crowds will congregate in the middle of town and become rowdy? The majority of the How the Light Gets In ticket holders camp in the field next to Booker's Edge, and that is a nuisance issue I won't even bother addressing here. And this is at the same time that they claim no antisocial behaviour is ever associated with their festival, despite eyewitnesses' account to the contrary. This is a big festival with big backers, and we are a small group of local residents. It is not the committee's fault that this whole process is fatally flawed. We have to speak first, and then we are not allowed to counter whatever claims the festival then makes. Last year, as has already been mentioned, a festival employee stated that the music would not bother anyone as it was going to be folk music, blatantly misleading the committee. Already this year's brochure features the same acts as last year, such as Max Galactic and Vivid People Disco, with a photo to illustrate the light show. The noise levels could, of course, be massively reduced with the use of appropriate sound deadening fabrics and materials, but the festival does not actually take real and genuine noise control measures. Turning down music after you have disturbed residents and received complaints does not leave residents undisturbed. So I end with asking those of you here who have this decision in your hands, please protect our quiet neighbourhood. Please stand up for us. We welcome the festival, but just like its big brother Hay Festival, it should end at 11 p.m. with reduced sound levels, or it should move. That is my say.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Perkins. Anybody got any questions?
No, it's the same.
Yeah, I'm just going to go to Emma. Well, in previous, what have we had? Sorry, we're getting feedback.
Try again, Chairman,
Yeah,
sorry.
thank you. Yeah. In previous, last year, how many complaints did Herefordshire Council receive
Okay,
on noise?
so licensing, I can't see any noise complaints received, but I have gone onto the system and I can find 2 noise complaints in 2018, 7 complaints in 19, and 2 complaints in 22.
Okay,
That's not saying there was any more, but as I'm not in that team, I can't.
yeah, yeah.
But that's all I can see on the system.
Okay, thank you, Emma. Sorry, I've now asked Julia Whittle if you'd like to.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you.
I'm a resident of Newport Street and I also a serving parish councillor on Cusack Parish Council. And I'll start by saying that when the festival took place on this site in 2018 and 2019, there were only 6 occupied houses on Newport Street, 10 on Jewellers Terrace and 12 on 90 Glassdoor Lane, and also, of course, further occupied houses on the Powys side of the border. During those 2 festivals, there was clear evidence of public disorder, people urinating in the street, loud and aggressive behaviour, people entering onto residents' gardens, litter being dropped in the street, into the Jewellers Brook and in residents' gardens, as well as a broken fence outside Hay and Brecon Farmers. This was reported to Cusack Parish Council at the time, and the ward councillor also, Philip Price, who was serving, after these events, but no action was taken, with only conciliatory responses provided. It would appear that nothing was actually formally fed back to the festival organisers. Booker's Edge added another 24 more houses directly onto Newport Street for the festival in 2022. The festival in 2022 did have less evident public disorder than 2018 and 2019, but the lack of strong stewardship when people left the site was still evident. The application indicates that the site is away from residential properties, but this is just not the case. The site is in very close proximity to residential homes and sounds travel easily and loudly across the street. There are now 53 occupied houses along Newport Street, Jewellers Terrace and 90 Glassdoor Lane, plus more on the Powys side of the border that are affected by the festival activities. The activities of the daytime festival are not intrusive, but the types of music that are played late at night are intrusive. The fact that the music is played in tents rather than outside makes very little difference, as the tents give little buffering and cannot in reality be called indoors. Some of the trees and vegetation have recently been removed behind Hay and Brecon Farmers, which will have an impact also on the possibility of noise reduction. The festival claims to be a philosophy festival, a long weekend of talks and debates, which in themselves are very good reasons for holding a festival. There is, however, a huge amount of live and recorded music, which makes it difficult to understand how this claim can be made. At last year's licensing hearing, the organisers stated to the committee that the music is folk and does not have a repetitive beat as some festivals do. Examples of music advertised for 2022 were foot-stomping bluegrass, trip-hop, hip-hop, rap, jungle, electronic, house music, garage, indie pop, indie rock, modern alternative pop sounds, alternative rock, soul-shaking disco debauchery and dance floor bangers to fire up the late-night shenanigans. I would suggest that's far removed from folk. The 2023 lineup would suggest more of the same as in 2022. The DJ actually being used for the disco music at How the Light Gets In Festival is actually appearing at the Hay Festival too, but those events end at 11 p.m. as previously stated. The measuring of the noise levels has historically been erratic. Using the dedicated phone number has proved to be less than effective, as it was very rarely answered. Although the festival had a noise management plan, in practice, this meant that when there was a complaint about the noise levels, it was then turned down, only to return to the same excessive levels as soon as a new act took over. The late night disco is particularly intrusive. Should the license be granted as requested, we would suggest a strict, independently monitored and enforced noise limit needs to be in place from 11 p.m. As stated before, 34 dBA is the recommended by the UK government guidelines. What we'd like to have explained is why the festival follows apparently different guidelines. And with regard to the background noise test before the festival begins, we would propose that these should be taken in the weeks before the festival, with some taken after 11 p.m. and not as detailed in the noise management plan, as suggested, this will be conducted between midday and event commencement on Friday. By the nature of the proposed timing, the area is naturally busy and any readings would not reflect typical weekend background noise levels. There appear to be a lot of discrepancies and inaccuracies in the noise management plan. Calvin Hank's response to public representations quite clearly acknowledges that over-limit sound levels occurred during 2022 and that noise levels had to be reduced. If the noise management plan had been adhered to, this would not have happened. Although there have not been many written representations in objection for 2023, it must be understood that many residents are reluctant to raise their heads above the parapet and complain in writing. Some do not actually feel able to complete the paperwork that is required by the licensing authority, and some people simply shut up and bear the brunt of their unhappiness. As a local CUSA Parish Councillor, I have been approached by a good number of residents on both sides of the border, even from the neighbouring village of Clyro, 1.5 miles away, expressing discontent with the late night disturbance. Some of the young parents at the front of Booker's Edge have expressed concern about the loud repetitive music, which causes vibration, which is extremely uncomfortable for them. In the representation from the Clerk of CUSA Parish Council, I am a little bit confused by this because it says there that they would support the application in principle, but the recorded minutes published actually say, having discussed council, resolved to comment on the licence application with no objection to the application in principle, but requesting a thorough and convincing noise management plan to be put in place. There is a perceived lack of action from Herefordshire Council regarding complaints from public regarding excessive noise, and it is expected that festival organisers follow the noise management plans that are agreed with the Herefordshire Council. The general consensus from those spoken to is that it would be more acceptable if the licence application was granted until 11 o'clock with the site cleared by 11:30 at the latest, to lessen the impact on residents, as this is the case with the Hay Festival, which still manages to be extremely successful. Going on to public safety, the road leading to the event, Newport Street, is an extremely busy road, even more than normal during holiday periods, in this case, the late spring bank holiday. The residents' concerns are already well documented with Herefordshire Council, with a proposed traffic management plan at the core of the discussions. The speed limit of 30 miles an hour is very rarely acknowledged, causing concern to both residents and pedestrians using the narrow pavement leading to the co-op. During the festival weekend, pedestrians can spill into the road due to the vast volume of people and some random parking of cars on the unlined road. In 2022, there was a clear documented instruction from Bruce Evans of the Transport Department at Hereford Council for there to be a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit from the bridge over the Judas Brook through to the Glanwye Business Park. This instruction was not carried out in full by the festival traffic management team, the signage being placed very close to the site entrance and the campsite entrance. The health and safety officer at the time, Calvin Hanks, was approached and asked to resolve the issue. He did go to look at the displayed Herefordshire Council signage, but nothing was done to resolve the issue.
Sorry.
Trying to contact Herefordshire Council Highways Department failed because of the bank holiday. With close calls and near misses were witnessed, but thankfully there was no reported serious incident.
Sorry, Julia,
because nothing happened that year, nothing else.
Sorry, Mrs. Whittle. We just had to mute you. Unfortunately, the licensing committee do not. Part of it is traffic doesn't come into our remit. Unfortunately, we can understand where you're coming from, but it's not our remit about traffic management. I'd just like to confirm that. Okay, sorry we had to mute you. Please carry on.
I'm asking her to unmute.
Yeah.
Not to ask her to.
Can you please unmute, please, Julia Whittle, please?
Hello?
Yeah, so sorry, did you hear what?
I did hear what you said, yes.
Yeah, we do appreciate, but unfortunately, it doesn't come under our remit, traffic, unfortunately.
Okay.
Please carry on.
I think that's all I have to say, really. I just want to state that just because a lot of people don't actually write in with representation, some people are frightened, scared, unaware of how to actually do it, and would rather just put up with the the nuisance, but there are definitely people who are unhappy about the timings and the loudness of the music carrying on after 11 o'clock.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? No, thank you. I now move to the applicant. I don't know who's going to go first. Is it going to be Hilary Lawson?
So it's going to be me, I'm afraid. You're going to have to hear from to start with.
Sorry, just confirm, are you Calvin Hanks? Sorry?
No, my name's McGregor. I'm the solicitor who's instructed.
Yeah, sorry, I do apologise. Hugh McGregor, yeah.
So before I start, I know that you've given me 15 minutes, but we've had 4 representatives who have spoken against the application, and there is a fair amount of information that they've raised and points that need addressing. And so if you can afford me, I did write to the council, I think a week ago, asking for 30 minutes. And in the absence, and this isn't, please don't think this is a criticism. At that time, I thought I was going to be limited to 10 minutes, which is why we've provided you with the statement and all of the documents that we have provided you with. So if you are able to afford me the courtesy of a little longer than 15 minutes so that we can address the points that have been raised, that would be very helpful. And I appreciate that you may have questions of my clients, and those will be dealt with by those who are on the call as well.
As I said at the beginning, it is 15 minutes per speaker. Evidently, we've gone in for, obviously they haven't taken 15 minutes each. I will use my exercise of discretion. So please, I'm not saying you're going to get half an hour, but please, if you can concentrate it as quickly as possible and precisely as possible, I do appreciate it.
I will do that, sir, and I'm grateful to you for that.
But if it needs to be, I will come in and politely cut you off.
If you could give me a 2-minute warning before you chop me off, because
I will do as much as I can. Yes,
that's very kind. I appreciate that, sir. This is an app. You have Hilary Lawson, who's the curator of the festival, on the call. You have Jazz Bakar, who's the CFO. You have Mandy Houghton, who's a local resident of Hay. And has been involved in all previous Hay festivals going back to 2009, and there is her statement at pages 3 to 15 of the supplementary bundle. And you have Calvin Hanks, who is an experienced and qualified chartered health and safety practitioner. He is the author of the EMP, the Event Management Plan, and the Noise Management Plan. And his experience appears at page 153. So the context of this application, the point has been made by a number of, a couple of the residents, that they appear and they're speaking on behalf of other people, or that there are people who feel that they couldn't make representations for whatever reason. I'm going to deal with that in the course of this presentation, because what you have to do is deal with what is before you. And I have sent in some draft outline submissions, and those appear at pages 161 and 162. And I would invite you to look very closely at those when you go to retire and consider this matter. But I'm going to follow the process that I've set out in my outline submissions in this presentation. But the summary, and I'm grateful to your officers for the summary of the application. It is a time-limited license for 3 nights and 4 days over the late May bank holiday. And the council's licensing policy recognises in common with many other policies across the country, the important contribution that the entertainment sector brings to local communities. And that is contained at page 2 of your licensing policy, and the comments made by the chairman, of Mr. Seddon, who is the chair of the committee. And we have provided you with an economic impact assessment, and that appears at MH2 of the supplementary bundle, and at paragraphs 20 to 27 of Mandy Houghton's statement. And the contribution, the economic contribution to the local community is anticipated to be in excess of £2.5 million. And I'm not going to take you through the detail, but the contribution that it does make, and it's a point that's made in your report about the community impact, and so that is why it is relevant and important. But when we talk about that, it's indirect and direct. It's about services, goods, purchases, employment. The support festival provides by putting on what is a unique festival with a whole array of internationally renowned speakers, artists and performers, and that's leaving aside the cultural, educational and reputational impact and footprint that it has for the local community. Now, so far as how the light gets in, that is contained at pages 4 to 6 of the additional material and at paragraph 6 to 19. And the festival itself has been in existence since 2008. And it has been at this location since 2018. And there is a rich mix of philosophy and of cultural entertainment, whether that's music, whether that's cabaret, and whether that is comedy. And all of that information is contained in the brochure that we have provided for you. And I make no apology for providing that brochure, because what we have tried to be throughout this whole process is open and transparent, not only in our engagement with the authorities, but also in our engagement with the local residents. And the suggestion that local residents perhaps didn't have time or weren't notified about the application, I'm going to come back to in a moment. But suffice it to say that this is a unique festival, and that is, as I say, set out in the statement of Mandy Houghton, and is perhaps best encapsulated in paragraphs 8 and 9 of her statement. How the light gets in, our aim has always been to create a wonderful atmosphere on the festival site, offering a wide range of different activities throughout the day and the evening, in addition to the core philosophy programme. This is why music and the atmosphere of the festival site is so important and central to the festival. If the music was further restricted, the unique character and purpose of the festival would be undermined. And since the festival was founded in 2008, and it was initially and exclusively at the Globe, there have been 3 significant changes. There's been a change in location to the current spot, which is a much more appropriate spot. And when it moved to this location, there were very few houses, if any, on the Booker's Edge estate. There have been a reduction in the number of days of the festival from 10 to 4, and there has been a reduction in the terminal hour from 2 until 1, and that happened in 2022. And so my clients are always conscious and cognizant of where they are, what they do, and how they impact on the local community, and that is why those changes have been made over the course of particularly the last 4 years. There has been significant pre-application consultation in advance of this application being submitted. And that's not only with your council, but with Powys County Council and with local residents. And that consultation will continue right through to the event, either through the SAG, the Safety Advisory Group, or with direct communication with the local residents through the further engagement letter, which you will have seen. And in advance of submitting the application, a draft operating schedule and a draft residence letter was sent to both councils. You sit on the cusp of 2 authorities, or the site sits on the cusp of 2 authorities. And those draft documents were sent to both Herefordshire and Powys, the offices in both of those authorities. And it is worthy of note, and we put particular significance on this in relation to the application that we have put to you, is that none of the responsible authorities made any suggestion to changes to the days, the hours, the times, the capacity, nor indeed made any suggestion to change any conditions or changes to the proposed conditions or changes in the noise levels within the noise management plan. And that pre-application consultation perhaps explains why none of the responsible authorities have made a representation to the application. And in advance of submitting the application, a pre-application consultation letter was sent to in excess of 50 local properties on the Booker's Edge estate, on the businesses and houses on Newport Street, Millbank Housing Development, the houses directly opposite the Globe at Hay. A copy was emailed to Cusack Parish Council, Hay Chamber of Commerce, Hay Town Council, and Y Glamping. And so there can be no suggestion that anyone did not know about this application. And in addition to that, there were 17 notices placed around the site and the application was also advertised in the local press. And we have been open and transparent throughout, and a further residence letter is due to be sent, and that appears at page 151 and 152 of the supplementary bundle. And we'll set out the contact number that my clients will provide, and which will be fully staffed during the totality of the festival for local residents to contact should they so wish during the course of the festival. The Safety Advisory Group has oversight of delivery, compliance and enforcement of the event to ensure that the activities are provided safely, and there is a provisional date for a Safety Advisory Group meeting to be held in May. The application itself is supported by a substantial schedule of conditions, and I'm not going to, in the interest of time, I'm not going to take you through those, but I would direct your attention to pages 34 to 47 of the report. And some of those conditions have already been complied with. What this application boils down to, and it distills down to, is public nuisance. Now, I'm going to set the context of that in a moment. But the custodian of the event management plan is Calvin Hanks, and he has been involved with the festival since 2017. And we have included it in its totality, again, in the interest of being open and transparent to you. It is a significant and substantial document. It is developed and designed in accordance with what's called the Purple Guide, and that's referenced on page 75 of the additional document. And that is something that has been developed by the Events Industry Forum. That is a living document and which the Safety Advisory Group will have sight of and do have sight of during the process. And it will be amended subject to any comments that the Safety Advisory Group have. But at the moment, that is the current draft. Behind the event management plan sit the appendices. I'm not going to take you to those, but those appear at page 119. At page 77, there is an event control centre, and that lists the roles and responsibilities of those who sit there. The audience profile is set out at page 82, and there is camping provided on site for 550 pitches, 123 yurts, and 40 pre-pitched tents. And that is consistent with what has happened before. And there is a section on food and drink, a further section on crowd management and stewarding policy, and those documents have already been shared with the Safety Advisory Group. There are, of course, other documents that sit behind the EMP, but for the purposes of the licence, we have only shared the noise management plan because we feel that that is the most appropriate document to be shared with you. Now, so far as the noise management plan is concerned, it was initially shared with Jacqueline Amani, your environmental health officer, who does not make a representation to this application. We received a response from her on the 10th of March. The changes that she recommended were incorporated and sent back to her on the 16th of March. And then a final draft noise management plan was sent to Jacqueline Amani. And this is simply an observation, it's not a criticism of anybody, is that since that time we have had no response back on that about any changes to the noise management plan. The key aims of the noise management plan are set out at page 125, and they are fourfold: to minimise the impact to local residents, to satisfy the licensing authority and in turn the Safety Advisory Group, to set up a programme of noise measurement and establish a complaints procedure and actions taken. And those are all very, very clearly set out and have had no adverse comments back from any member of the Safety Advisory Group. It's been drafted in line with what is called the POP code. And if you want any more information on that, and indeed DB levels, then Mr. Hanks is better positioned to answer those questions. And at the request of the Environmental Health Officer, we have included an additional monitoring point at Wyford Road, and that was at the suggestion of Jacqueline Amani. And there is already a noise monitoring point at Booker's Edge. The complaints procedure, and I'm not going into the detail of this, and I will if you want me to, but what I want to do is try and get as much of the information across to you, and then if you have questions, then we can pick those up at that stage. The complaints procedure is set out at page 135. Training will be provided to all members of staff who will be sitting within the control centre on Thursday. There will be test calls made to the complaints line. There will be health and safety and noise consultants on site for the totality of the event. And in advance, subject to any decision you make today, a further letter will be sent to the local residents. At all times, we have been transparent with the Environmental Health Officer of both authorities. They have made no representation to the application. And there is, as you will have seen, a letter of support from Cusop Parish Council talking about a convincing noise management plan. And that is, frankly, what you have been provided with. The role of the responsible authorities is key in applications of this nature. And it talks, what the Act talks about, or what the guidance talks about, is proportionality. The responsible authorities were part of the significant pre-application that we've undertaken. None of the responsible authorities have served a representation at all. And that is a powerful observation about the application and should not be lightly put aside. The committee will be familiar with paragraph 9.12 of the national guidance, which states that each responsible authority will be an expert in their respective fields. And in some cases, it is likely that a particular responsible authority will be the licensing authority's main source of advice in relation to a particular licensing objective. And so when you talk about crime and disorder or antisocial behaviour, that would be the police. And when you talk about public nuisance, that would be the Environmental Health Officer. And so they are your guiding lights when it comes to matters of they are your starting point when it comes to matters of the licensing objectives. And there is a case called Thwaites, which is referred to in your report. And just so that we're clear, what Thwaites says is that the case recognises, and again, it reiterates what the guidance says, is that responsible authorities are experts in their fields and that weight should be attached to their representations. And although this was a High Court case and the references to magistrates, the same point is equally true of licensing committee members. Licensing committee, it talks about magistrates, they must measure their own views against the evidence presented to them. In some cases, the evidence presented will require them to adjust their own impression. This is particularly likely to be so where it is given by a responsible authority such as the police, and the converse is true where there is no representation from a responsible authority. And so these are matters of significance and should not be discarded lightly by the licensing committee.
No. Right, Mr. McGregor, you've had your 15 minutes so far. If you could start summing up, I'd appreciate it, because obviously there might be some questions coming. So, I will give you another 5 minutes, Mr. McGregor. Okay.
So on the representations, we have set out very clearly why the application should be granted in the terms that we have requested. And that is contained at paragraphs 54 and 55 and at pages 10 to 14 of the supplementary bundle. And you've heard about the impact that an earlier closing time will have on the festival. And again, this goes back to the fact that there are, and the financial impact perhaps may be of little concern to you, but what is really important here is about the promotion of the licensing objectives and what my client and what we have presented to you as a licensing committee and to the safety advisory group and to the responsible authorities of both neighbouring councils is whether they are satisfied that the evidence or the documentation that we have provided to them will promote the licensing objectives. And in the absence of any representations from them, then I think you can be satisfied that they are satisfied that the licensing objectives will be promoted by the granting of the application that we have presented to you. And so given that I'm slowly running out of time, I'm not going to take you to each and every point that we have made in there, but we have sought to answer all of the questions and queries that have been raised on this call in the statement of Mandy Houghton, and in the absence of time, I would invite you and encourage you to read all of those documents that we have provided to you. We are sensitive to the concerns that have been raised by the residents in the pre-planning and the consultation and the provision of complaints hotline, the reduction of noise levels after 11 o'clock. And I'm going to come to my summary. How the Light Gets In is a unique festival. The context is that this festival application is time limited to 3 nights and 4 days. The balance of responses that you have received from the local community are in support of this application. There has been widespread consultation with the local community in advance of submitting the application. And what you are presented with and what it distills down to is 4 representors against this application, against the 50+ properties that were consulted, 7 positive representations in favour of the application. There are no representations from the responsible authorities. The application is supported by a substantial schedule of conditions, and there is a secondary lockstep to the application, given that the event management plan and the noise management plan will be subject of ongoing scrutiny by the Safety Advisory Group. And this is my very last point that I will make, so if you just afford me a couple of minutes. Licensing is all about proportionality, and it is about the promotion of the licensing objectives. And when you look at proportionality, you look at the fact that this is a time-limited license for 4 days, 3 nights. You look at the supporting documents that have been provided. You look at the support that has been provided from the local residents. And had I more time, I would have read out a couple of the comments, but I know that you as an experienced committee will have read those. And when you look at proportionality, you look at the lack of representation from those who have, from the responsible authorities for all the reasons that I have just said. Having had concerns articulated to us by the local residents, we are directing significant resource to our noise management consultant with a carefully considered and robust noise management plan. That will continue to involve full engagement with the environmental health team, the police, the licensing officers, and a finalised noise management plan, once signed off, will be agreed by the Safety Advisory Group. My client is sensitive to the concerns of the residential objectors, but bearing in mind the support from the local community and the lack of representations from the responsible authorities, we invite you as a committee to conclude that a fair, proportionate and balanced means of protecting those concerns and promoting the licensing objectives has been proposed and agreed between the various officers and the applicant through a robust schedule of conditions, a robust event management plan, a robust noise management plan, and the various other policies and documents that sit behind those plans. And we would ask that you grant this application as applied for all the reasons that I've set out.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Members, have you got any questions?
Yes, I do have one. Well, I don't know whether it's a question or a statement, but the plans are, as has been said, extremely comprehensive. But written plans are fine, but there would have, if the people who have spoken are telling us the truth, and we have no reason not to believe them, there seems to have been evidence that perhaps they have not been so well executed at times. We've had several people say that they asked for the noise levels to be turned down. They were turned down briefly and then went back up again. So I just make that comment that plans are all very well, but it's their execution that matters.
Yeah. Councillor Hardwick.
Right, I've got no specific questions, but I'd just like to thank the members of the public for addressing the committee. They've been very clear, and also thank Mr. McGregor for his comments as well.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, the only thing, yes, thank you for that. Yeah, thank you all. We do appreciate you all coming here and putting your point across. Obviously, some things we can't take into account because they're not like anything to do with the Licensing Act. But to reiterate, like some of my colleagues just said to my left, it is about engaging with the public, making sure if they got a complaint that the phone is picked up. But I think, to be honest, I think we can conclude at the moment, and we'll adjourn. And I would say, I think it's going to be 10:12.
Yes.
So before you adjourn, and I do apologise for this, is that I've been asked if I can just respond to the point about the noise levels going back up.
Yeah, carry on. I'll give you a minute. Yes, carry on, Mr. McGregor.
If that has happened, then I can only apologise for that happening. Suffice it to say that, and it may be something that Calvin Hanks wants to come in on now, but the policies and procedures that we've put forward, and the training that is again going to be reiterated and provided to local residents, will ensure that that simply does not happen again, if indeed it did happen before. The noise levels are reduced after 11 o'clock, and no one, none of the responsible authorities, and they are your experts, the Environmental Health Officer Jacqueline Amani, who we've had significant engagement with, has not suggested that those dB levels be reduced further than they already are. I don't know if it's if Calvin wants to come in on that point about noise levels going back up, but that's all I would propose to say about that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. McGregor. Yeah, I think what the point was is the member of the public who was saying that they actually reported it. It came out after 11, so it initially dropped, then it went higher. So that is the main concern of the residents. So if, yes, obviously if Mr. Hanks wants to come in, by all means.
Thank you very much, sir. Yes, the nature of music is that obviously we set a level, then if you have a change of artist, you have to then re-establish levels. Also, the important thing to remember is throughout the period, we are off-site, on the street, outside properties, monitoring, which is the point of noise monitoring. We are then able to pick it up straight away and address it. When you are dealing with noise, it's an interesting issue to deal with, and there are variances. All it takes is someone decides to move a bit closer to a mic and it affects your levels, and the sound engineers are quick on it and bringing it down, but sometimes it will be slightly over, and we, with our noise monitoring on the street, are able to bring it down straight away. We have direct control, we have direct link to the event management office and to the sound engineers, and so one of the things we do is we also run a WhatsApp group and we communicate immediately, which is a lot quicker of that communication. So we are there on the streets, bringing the noise down straight away. So if there is unfortunately an increase, often due to a change of artist or a change in music, then we can arrest that situation straight away and bring that level down.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hanks. Any more questions? No. So the time is now.
Excuse me. Sorry, am I allowed to just ask one question of Mr. Hanks?
Not normal procedure. I will allow it. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Can I then please have the noise monitoring station on my property? If he's out and about, checking all the levels and able to turn the noise down, if I have one on my property that's being recorded and reported to the SAG afterwards, can I have one, please?
I think that's a matter for the licensing and the event organisers to decide, because it's obviously going to have an impact on the requirements and the scope of practice for us. So I think that's a discussion that needs to be had. I can't give you a definitive answer at this point in time.
But can I just answer? Can I help on that point? Is that when we sent the draft, excuse me, when we sent the draft noise management plan to your environmental health officer, she asked for one additional noise monitoring point, and I've forgotten the address of that now, but that was added as an additional noise monitoring point.
Yeah.
At that time. And it's contained in the statement.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mr. McGregor. Yeah, so you're on mute, Mrs. Whittle. We got your point. Sorry.
She's not my environmental health officer. Because I'm Powys, mine is Stuart Eckley, who sat on the SAG committee, and he asked for an invite to today, but he never received one. Okay. I'm Powys Environmental Health. Jacqueline Amani won't deal with me because I'm not in Herefordshire.
Okay, all right. That's something you need to discuss out of here, I think, to be honest, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. The time is now 11:49. The subcommittee now adjourned to discuss the application. We'll come back. Yes, 25 minutes, which will be 12:15. And we'll be back to let you know our decision. For any remote attendees, I'd be grateful if you could please rejoin the meeting 5 minutes prior to the end of the adjournment in case stream recommence. Oh.
And we're live again, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, welcome back to the Licensing Subcommittee. Apologise, it's been a few minutes late. Obviously, it's when we thoroughly discuss. I will now read the decision of the subcommittee. Decision: after hearing representations today and having regard to all the written and verbal evidence submitted, it is the subcommittee's decision to grant the applications as applied for. Reasons: the reasons for this is the subcommittee has taken into account the written representations and information presented to the committee and fully recognised the concerns raised and the reasons why the representations were made. However, the subcommittee considers the application made will promote the licensing objectives. I would like to clarify to members of the public that you can go to the Licence Department and the Herefordshire Council with any evidence-based concerns. The subcommittee does not have any jurisdiction over Powys County Council, so I recommend that Dawn Farnworth contacts the Environmental Health Department of Powys County Council to inquire about a noise monitoring situation. That is our decision, but please, members of the public, if you have any concerns, please make sure you write them down and make sure you get them to us. Okay, thank you.
So can I just say on behalf of my clients, thank you very much for your time, to those that have attended as well, and for the decision that you've made.
Yeah, thank you. That concludes the item for the meeting. Before I formally close the meeting, can I check with the